So here we are inside of Photoshop, and I've gone ahead and opened up our file. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to create a copy of the background. So we're just going to simply come over to our layers palette, take the background, drag it down to the new layer icon, and create a duplicate. The reason for that is going to protect it as we make changes so that we don't damage the original file. The next step that we need to do is we're going to create a levels adjustment. You'll notice that this image looks kind of gray because we chose in the scanner software not to make any color corrections. So we're going to use levels to set the black and white point of the image. So to do that, we're going to come down in the layers palette and we're going to choose from the adjustment layers, levels. Now within the histogram, you'll notice there's nothing in the low end or the high end. So we're just simply going to take the black slider here and drag it into the foot of where we start to get some black information. Same thing with the whites. We're going to take that and we're going to draw that in to the very base of the histogram where we're starting to get some actual white values. Now it's picking up this little foot over here at the end is picking up kind of some of the background of the scanner. So we're still going to be getting some value in these zero areas. The next thing that we want to do is to blur this background. The reason for that is there's variations in these when we start to read the values. And so it'll help kind of smooth out each of the values. So we're going to choose from the layers palette, background copy. And in order to blur it, we're going to say filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. Within the Gaussian blur, we're going to end up blurring it at about 5. You'll notice if we want to go just blurry enough so that we can still recognize what these values are that are written on our actual negative, so that we can still read which values we're doing. So as we start to bring that up to say around 5 or so, we start to get to a point where we can kind of still read the values, but it's blurred as much as possible. So here we are at 5.5. I can still make out those values, so we'll say OK there. And again, we did that on the background copy. So the next step is to actually write down what the values are. So in order to be able to see that, we need one of the palettes that doesn't come up as the normal kind of preference of Photoshop. So we're going to go up to Window in the top menu bar, and we're going to choose Info. Now, if you're doing this a lot, there is a shortcut F8 if you want to do it that way. Otherwise, Window, Info. And so here's our Info palette. And because we're in 16-bit grayscale, it's just giving us, on this side, the black, not the RGB or CMYK. So as we take our cursor from the mouse into any of these values, it gives us a percentage of black. So the white areas are going to have a low number, and the black areas are going to have a high number. And so what we're going to plot are the input values and the output values. So the inputs are the knowns. These are the values that we actually had inside of Photoshop when we printed our original negative. So on one side of a piece of paper, we're going to put in. And then on the other side, we're going to put out. Now, we don't have to plot every single number that's on here. But where we need the most change is really in the highlight values. We don't need as much in the mid values or as much in the shadows. So we're going to plot more of the white areas and less of the dark areas. So to start with, we can write down what our input values are. So we definitely want to subtract 0, and we might want to do, say, 2, 6, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And then once we get to about 30, we can start going maybe only 40, 50, 60, 70. And then in the low end, we might want to, again, do some of those greater steps. So maybe 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, and then 100. So those are the values that we're going to be looking at as we go along. When we go to plot them in the curve, we may not have to actually enter all of those values. So as we go along, we're going to simply take the cursor up here, and when we scroll over it, it gives us in the info palette and the K a value. So 0 is actually reading between 9 and 11. So I'm going to mark that as as 10. So the output of that value is 10. If we go down to 2, it's giving us the same. If we come down to 6, 6 is actually giving us 8. If we come down to 10, it's giving us 13. If we go to 15, again, it's giving us about the same, 8, 9, 10. If we come down to 20, 20 is giving us a value of about 14. If we skip over to number 25, it's giving us about the same, 9. So you'll notice all of these values, it doesn't really seem to matter. All the way from 0 to 25, we're getting the same reading. That's just kind of the base value of the albumin. So when we create our curve, it's going to really start to affect that end. So again, if we skip down to 30, we're getting 13, 14. So we'll write down 14. If we skip down to 40, here we're starting to get some change, 19, 20. When we get down to 50, here we're getting up to 27. And then we'll go to, next step will be 60. So here we're getting a reading of about 35. And then we'll come down to our next one, 70. 70 is giving us a reading of 55. 75 is giving us a reading of 57. 80. 80 is giving us a reading of 72. 85 is giving us a reading of 84. 90 is giving us a value of 88. 95 is giving us a value of 90. And 100 is giving us a value of 91. Okay, so those are all of our results. So this is what the computer printed. These are the results of what we're actually getting from our scanned image. So what we're going to do is plot these. Now, we don't want to plot the input and the output. We actually need to reverse those. So instead of transcribing all of these into 2 separate columns, I'm just going to cross out the names here at the top. I'm going to change this to output. I'm going to change this to input. And you'll see in a second once we open up the curve why we're doing that. So the next step is to then create a curve. The curve will then create an adjustment which will help kind of match what the output values are that the computer gives us to the ability of the paper to actually render those values. And it'll start to match it up. Kind of the same thing that you would do with printing, and calibrating the printer for color.